Oh, banger.
Welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
UFC 285, let's get into it. Fight Night Picks, as always, one half of your host, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram, at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP, respective socials. Matt, it's finally time. John Jones doesn't look like the guy in the picture anymore.
Wait, he's fighting Jake Gyllenhaal, right?
Well, no, Jay Heron. You missed it. UFC 222. But when you look at it, obviously John Jones doesn't look like our picture. However, He weighs what I said that he weighs. So 240 for John Jones, 247.5 for Cyril Gane. So all those clickbaity websites can say John Jones weighs more than Cyril Gane.
Well, he does.
And it is the truth, but both very close in weight. The co-main event, that is together. It's a title fight. Jeff Neal, whose name I tried to weave into that sentence, Jeff Neal did not make the weight. So we have a lot to say about that. But Matt, all 14 fights still on this card. And I know everybody over there in the comments section, Hype MMA, Gagnon, we've got Eldar, we got VT, we got Justin Franks, Fluffy Stuff, we got Orlando, we got OJs, we got a lot of people over there in the comment section. John Jones did weigh more than Cyril Gane. So it's kind of like when you watch Happy Gilmore and they go, Grizzly Adams did have a beard. Yes, I know that's a fact.
I guess my question is, did you have any expectations for what John Jones was going to weigh yesterday? Because it was a thought that was in my head a little bit, and I'd seen that there were betting odds actually out for what people thought he was going to weigh in at, and the odds were set at, the weight was set at 242.5, and I thought that was interesting because that was quite high, I assumed anyways. I thought we would see him maybe weigh in 235 to 240. I thought it would be on the southern side of 240, but to see him weigh in close to 250 is interesting. I don't know how much that will affect him, but I will say he did weigh in a little bit heavier than I thought he was going to.
I know I said it in the video at the start of the week. For me, it was 250 the whole time, so I was surprised he actually weighed a little bit less than that. But yes, I understand that half a pound more is more. It's just not a whole heck of a lot more. So that main event is together. And Matt, if this is a person's first time tuning into the show, we're already chatting about the fight. We throw it on over to our fight in the night screen. John Jones taking on Cyril Gane. And usually I don't redo the graphics that I have here. I just take it on faith. I just keep it up. But there obviously is the big difference in the John Jones weigh-ins. But for both of these guys, they're no strangers to fight of the night. For John Jones, he defended that light heavyweight strap 11 times. For Cyril Gane, he was able to win the interim belt against Derek Lewis in Houston. It was Derek's hometown. He goes out there, finishes him. And then in the fight against Francis Ngannou, we get to see Francis with the wrestling shoes on, more so than we've seen throughout his career, but a building block and a stepping stone from his fight against Stipe Miocic when he won the belt. So a big win for Francis. Now he's out of the picture, and he's never coming back to the UFC, so it seems. So for Cyril Gane, he gets that opportunity against John Jones. I think this could be a fight of the night because both of these guys are definitely down to put on a fun fight. And we've seen some stinkers from Gane, and we've seen some stinkers from Jon Jones too in the past. Don't get it twisted. But these guys definitely have something to prove in this title fight.
This is a bit of a cop-out too, and it's a bit of a cheap pick, because I'm going to be excited for this fight no matter what stage it's at, no matter what's been happening. And I compare it to Wonderboy Thompson versus Darren Till. One of the worst fights you could ever watch. But again, at the moment when you're watching that fight and you realize that if either guy makes the smallest mistake, there's going to be some very major consequences as a result of it. I think this fight is going to be very similar to that. It's going to be so interesting. We'll see if Jon Jones can finally get that takedown on a guy like Ciryl Gane in the heavyweight division.
So 2 big super chats, Tyler James and the MVP Malone Hart. So we'll go Tyler first in the order of things. So thanks for the great content every week. Super excited for the card. Thoughts on Jon Jones being initially set as an underdog. I think Jon is absolutely going to dominate the heavyweight division. I mean, Sergey Pavlovich will have something to say about it. But Jon Jones opened plus 140. He went down pretty quick, and he's steadily gone down. He's a minus 173 on best fight odds. Gane open minus 166. He's a plus 146. So the question there being, what do you think about Jon being set as an underdog? He hasn't fought in 3 years. I think it's kind of justified if you're going to set him as an underdog.
Exactly, and that's why I do think the odds maker said initially set him being there for the exact reason you said. Like, the majority of the work that Ciryl Gane has done in the UFC has been since the last time we've seen Jon Jones compete at the highest level. So for Jones, it really is a show me what you have. And for Jones, I'm still not completely sold if we're going to see him be like a regular UFC fighter after this. If I'm being completely honest, like, I think Jon Jones, even with him being the star of the level that he is, he's probably only going to fight once every 9 months, maybe 10 months. Like, that was the thing. Even when George St. Pierre was in his prime, he even admitted to this. He was like, listen, I only really like fighting once, maybe twice a year because I can hold the belt for a lot longer. It allows me a lot more sponsorship opportunities outside of the cage, and I can make a lot more money that way. And I do think for a guy like Jon Jones, he is of that kind of star power to where he can sit around, hold on to the title for a while, and wait for some bigger fights in the heavyweight division.
And Malone Hart, do you think Jon Jones is more or less dangerous with the dad bod? I think he's forever dangerous. And if you watch any of the embeddeds, every single thumbnail is Jon Jones and some exclusive to Jon Jones, and they start off the countdown with him trying to be dangerous with his dog. His dog can bite people on
I will
command.
say this, though. I was a little concerned to see him breathing heavily after, like, playfully wrestling with Bo Nickel for 30 seconds. A little part of me in the back of my head said, okay, well, Ciryl Gane's a pretty big guy. He can defend some takedowns. If you're breathing heavy after, like, joking around, I'm a little worried about those 25 minutes.
Prince Vegeta-san, can someone explain to me how a professional athlete has to work 2 jobs? Prince Vegeta-san, watch lower-end fight nights where the guys are making 12 and 12 and have to pay their managers, their gyms, and everything else before they can then pay themselves. And then, of course, taxes play a factor. That's how you figure it out. Matt, a real fight of the night, Geoff Neal, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, I did, again, update the weigh-ins on this one, 175 to 171. Somebody said Martinez missed weight in the Saaiman fight, and he did, and we'll touch on that. But I think even with the weight miss of Geoff Neal, I'm still really excited about this fight. I think it should deliver. This is the last fight before those title fights take place. I think it's a big one over there. The Cosmic Show, thanks for the best MMA show on YouTube. Jon Jones is fighting in an event here in Albuquerque. What? Huh?
No, Jon Jones fighting is an event.
It's an event in Albuquerque. Now that
I'm
makes
sure it
sense, and I bet it is because, yeah, Jackson Wink and the whole local lore around Jon Jones, I bet people are excited about him. Matt, Geoff Neal, Shavkat Rakhmonov, I know you're amped for it. I think a lot of people are in this one.
This should be an incredible fight. I'm a little worried that Geoff Neal had an injury or something during training camp because I don't look at Geoff Neal and think of a guy who's just not going to try to cut that weight, and that is a significant weight miss. That's not a guy who only misses by half a pound. Like, 4 pounds is a very significant weight miss, so I'm a little concerned about what shape Geoff Neal is showing up in this fight in. But again, this is an important one for Shavkat because we all know how talented of a fighter he is. He just has to go out there and prove it against the highest level of competition. We get a taste of that against Neil Magny his last time out, but if he can go out there and really dominate a guy like Geoff Neal, I think we all have a ton of respect for Geoff Neal and how talented he is. So if Shavkat can look good against him, he could probably look good against anybody in the division.
Well, a good opportunity for those guys at 170, the main event, the heavyweight title. But as you know, with Fight Night Picks, and with question mark kicks, we start all the way from the bottom, and I saw Eldar say, yeah, is the Drake curse real? I'll tell you what, the Eminem curse is for Andre Muniz in the main event last weekend. There was a switch of the pick last week on question mark kicks, so we'll see if that plays a factor today with those weight misses. But Matt, some really, really big fights, and we start off with Loik Radzhabov taking on Esteban Ribovics, one of the longest videos from the week. We had this one and the main event, and of course Jeff Neal and Rachmanov. But when you look at this matchup, Justin Frank's hitting up the Super Chat. Super Chat's going wild today, so thank you very much for that. But when you look at this fight, let us know down below in the comments section who you have, because a lot of people are hyped on the young prospect out of Argentina. And if you look at it, the level of competition between these guys is definitely different. The state at which they are at currently in their careers is very, very different, because you have the undefeated prospect making his UFC debut. You have the once defeated, 4 times defeated, no longer prospect in Radzhabov, a guy who's challenged for the PFL title, gone all the way for the $1 million, unsuccessful in those fights. His fight against Natan Schultz wasn't very close. His fight that he had the last time against Hausch Manfiao was very close.
Great
so
fight.
Had a little bit of a leg to stand on that maybe won the fight, but I had it 3 rounds to 2 for Manfiao. But when you look at it for Radzhabov, when you look at it for Ribovics, these guys are both finishers to the nth degree. Darren Case is saying Radzhabov for the win. Prince Vegeta-san, who has better wrestling? I'd say probably Radzhabov, if I'm just answering your question.
But Ribovics is a dangerous guy off his back, and that's the really volatile thing
he
about
is,
this.
And then there, Corey McGregor, I got Ribovics plus 200 for 100% finish rate is crazy. So when you look at both these guys, Matt, obviously both guys are finishers to the nth degree. One guy switches stances and is probably a more dynamic fighter, but he finishes fights very early, so we don't get to see how he progresses in fights, especially against higher levels competition.
Well, what I like about Radzhabov is he's a guy with a very high floor. I'm just not really sure about what his ceiling's going to be in the UFC, because he does some things extremely well. He's just not the most varied guy in the world. He is very boxing heavy. His wrestling's very good if he can get that part of his game going, because of how dominant his top control can be. He has great ground and pound. He is a very heavy fighter from that top position too, once he is able to initiate the takedown. But his boxing and his stand-up is something that I think the higher level guys in the division could probably take advantage of. Guys who can throw a lot of kicks in there, throw the leg kick especially, but I do think this is a good first step for him in the UFC. Esteban's a guy who, many of you have mentioned, has a crazy finish rate. It is 100%, is dangerous off his back too, and I wonder how much of a part that's going to play in this fight, because if Esteban's too comfortable off his back, he could just be giving away moments and giving away rounds from that position. But on the flip side, if he get threatened with a couple submissions and just get them tight enough to where Radzhabov's not comfortable going for a lot of those takedowns, it might make this fight a lot more interesting on the feet. But I do still have Radzhabov for all the reasons I mentioned. I do like his wrestling enough, and I don't think he's going to put his neck into bad enough positions for him to potentially get submitted, especially early on in this one.
For me, if you like Esteban Ribovics as a pretty big underdog, I'm not going to fault you on it at all.
Exactly.
Because he is a pretty interesting prospect. And, you know, you look at Argentinian prospects, you look at former Samurai Fight House champions. Eileen Perez is one. She was really good and dominant on the regional scene, but you could kind of tell the limitations when she got up to the top level, and she took on a different opponent in her debut. There were a lot of extenuating factors. She was supposed to fight last weekend. And then you look at the other Samurai Fight House champion that fought in the UFC very recently, in Francisco Prado, and they put him in on short notice against Jamie Mullarkey, who had a lot of experience. And Prado fought well.
He could have counted himself.
He just fought a really, really high-level fighter, and it didn't work out. I could see that going the same way for Ribovics in this fight. Now, he looked great on Dana White's Contender Series. He kept that finish rate up. Loik Radzhabov, very interesting fighter. And Radzhabov's taking this fight on about 10 days' notice. So if you do look at it for Radzhabov, he is on short notice. He's always down to fight, even though he hasn't fought in a little over a year. He fought Zach Zane. He was getting ready for the Ultimate Fighter. Gilbert Burns had to step in for him and kind of pump his tires. And then all of a sudden he's in the UFC. So I like Loik Radzhabov. I think his wrestling's a little bit better. I think up against the clinch he can kind of wear on Ribovics, which is kind of funny because both guys can be fast twitch, and I would think, and I don't say this very often, that maybe even the younger fighter would have more lasting power as the fight goes on, because Radzhabov has 5-round experience. He's a former champion as well. But I do like the varied attack, the stance switches, the odd angle punches, and the jiu-jitsu that we've seen out of Ribovics. I will go with Radzhabov in the matchup, but a really, really fun fight.
And Esteban's one of those guys who, if he started his UFC career and went 3-0 with 3 finishes, I would not be surprised whatsoever, but this is a really difficult matchup for him to have. So if he hits as an underdog in his debut on a big pay-per-view, that's a big deal for him. So hopefully this could just be a really fun fight, because this is one of the better card-opening fights that you will ever get.
Branch above, what's good, Craig and Matt? Thoughts on Conor McGregor acting? I don't think he was acting at the weigh-ins. He was serious as it gets. And Matt, Jake Gyllenhaal, weighing in, and I thought...
I like Jake Gyllenhaal quite a bit.
First of all, Gyllenhaal gets out, he does the thing, it was kind of weird, and then I thought, wait, is that Jay Huron? And sure enough, yeah, it is. So UFC 222 tonight, UFC 285 tonight. There's so much going on.
Jake Gyllenhaal's in one of my favorite movies ever. Zodiac's a great film.
Yeah, I like, what was it? The
Nightcrawler's really good
That's
too.
what I was going
like
for. Nightcrawler's a good movie, so yeah.
But also, I want whatever supplements Jake Gyllenhaal's on. Because he has the build of me in a lot of his films, and he doesn't look like me at all up on that scale.
He's on the Lord's juice. Jake Gyllenhaal. Matt, the next fight, Damon Blackshear taking on Farid Basharat. And listen, when it comes to prospects, you only have, 4 debuts on this card. You have Basharat, you have the aforementioned Ribovics and Radzhabov, you have Bo Nickel as well. So some really high-level fighters on this card making their debuts on the pay-per-view, or at least undercard and on the pay-per-view for Nickel. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, Damon Blackshear, former CFFC champ, and I went, you know what? I bet somebody out there, they're going to laugh that he lost to Chris Moutinho, but you look at all the other wins that he has, all the losses that he has. Damon Blackshear, very high-level competition outside of the UFC. And sure as shoot, somebody went out there and said he lost to Chris Moutinho, this guy sucks, and I'm taking Basharat to win. I'm going to tell you this. Basharat's a pretty big favorite in this matchup, and it's pretty well-deserved if you watch the way that Farid Basharat fights. Now, level competition for both of these guys, it goes to Blackshear over Basharat. You look at the way that Basharat was able to go out there and win on Dana White's Contender Series, and you look at some of the fights that he's had on the regional scene, finishing guys that he should finish. Some go to decision, but very varied attack of a guy like Basharat. But when I look at Basharat and then another prospect that I just finished saying is varied, and I like him, and he's fun, but I don't think he's going to win. When I look at Basharat, when I look at Ribovics, Basharat's kind of got that it factor when I look at both of them, because I can see Basharat game planning a little bit differently, conserving his energy, and the big thing for Basharat is offensive with the takedown as the fight goes on, but at the start he has good defensive hips and movement, and that type of thing can carry Basharat quite far in the UFC.
And that's why I do like him in this matchup especially. I think Blackshear is really going to have to implement the takedown, and really early on in this matchup too, just to see how much success he can have with that one weapon, because I think if he waits until the second and the third round, it might be a little bit too late to start implementing some of those things, but if he can start taking down Basharat, especially early on in the fight, I think he could have some success, and I think that could open up his own striking too. The problem is, I think he's going to eat a lot of strikes on his way in for some of those entries with his striking, and I don't know if his striking on the outside in this matchup is going to be good enough. And the one thing that I do like about Basharat is, even when he does win these fights by decision, it's not like he's winning the first round and second round very dominantly, and then his cardio is falling off a cliff in the third round. He's someone who can keep a steady pace throughout 3 rounds, and that's why I don't think this fight's going to be all that one-sided for 1 round, and then we're going to have these big shifts in momentum. I think this could be a really fun fight between these two guys. It's a really high-level fight, too. Hopefully Blackshear, and I think you'll agree with me on this, we're going to get a better version of him this time out than we did in his debut, because of course he's had a full training camp, but I do still like Basharat in the match.
Well, a couple of things over there in the comments section. Scott B saying, does Blackshear have a shot? Seen some people picking him. Scott B, did you watch our vid? The other part about it, there was somebody, Adam, saying I like Blackshear here, and Chris Pauly saying Blackshear looked gassed in the 3rd round against Law. He took that fight on a few days' notice, won the first 2 rounds, and then got tuckered out in the 3rd round, and it could have been scored, and it was by 2 of the judges as a 10-8 for Zalal. They sent Zalal packing. They end up with the draw. Blackshear first 2 rounds. So we end up here, Matt, and again, as I drop the mouse, Damon Blackshear is, and I'll just like multitask here and try and make it cool and professional. Damon Blackshear is the underdog, and he is not the one that the fans are picking in this one. At Fight Night Picks for the total vote, 75% with Farid Basharat, 25% with Damon Blackshear. I still do have Damon Blackshear here. I think he has a wrestling advantage. He can overtake Basharat with it. I think he has nice basic boxing combinations that can at least keep things steady on the feet. But when I look at a guy like Basharat, he does cut very good angles. He does strike on the back foot quite well, and he moves laterally well in his fights. So Basharat, deserved favorite, and there's definitely many avenues for him to win. I just prefer Blackshear in the matchup.
I think Shavita's the higher ceiling out of the 2 Basharat brothers, not to automatically compare the 2, but I still think Farid is a good fighter. Don't get me wrong. I think this will be a really entertaining fight. I just have the Basharat brother.
All right, Matt. So we move into our next fight, and honestly, I could care less. I mean, Jessica Penne's fighting Tabatha Ricci. They rematch these two. It's either a stepping stone for a prospect, or it's the opportunity for the older, more experienced former Invicta Atomweight champion to go out there and put a stamp on a fight. And for Penne, since the layoffs and the comeback, she was able to get the win against Lupita Godinez. A lot of people thought that Lupita won, but then she was able to go out there against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She looked really good. And then for Penne, it's just kind of been wishy-washy in these last number of performances. And if she can really turn back the clock and beat somebody like Tabatha Ricci, who has nice Muay Thai, who has good Jiu-Jitsu, that'd be great to see, because in Penne's last fight against Emily Ducote, she stood at range, but she had, no success against the striking of Ducote.
And that's the weird thing about Penne. Penne's a fighter who can have success, but the circumstances have to be very, very particular for her to have that success. She's a good grappler, but she's not going to get wrestling takedowns in the traditional way. It is a lot of those head and arm throws. There's a lot of very judo-heavy takedowns from the clinch, and I don't think she's going to have success to that level in a fight with Ricci. But I do think Penne can have success in the grappling against Ricci once it does hit the mat. I will give her that. I do think there's going to be a lot of scrambles in this matchup. So if you do have Penne, you probably think she's going to be able to find the back of Ricci at some point, just kind of set down in one of those more dominant positions and hold that for the majority of the round. And I could see that being a path to victory for her. I just think Ricci's going to be the more active fighter. And I do think the Emily Ducote fight showed, at least accentuated some of the things that Pena does struggle with, especially at range. She doesn't do great with her boxing. She has a very high guard. She holds her knees kind of high too. She just doesn't have a lot of strikes from the outside that can help build momentum. And I think for those reasons, you hate to say the sport has somewhat passed her by, but it is kind of wild. Like, Penne fought for the title before most of you guys probably even started watching MMA. Like, that's not a wild thing to say. She fought Viviane and Jacek in 2015.
She's only been submitted once. It was by Michelle Watterson years and years and years ago. Bundle of Humble with the super chat. Thanks a lot. Keep up the good work.
Bundle of Humble.
So, when you do look at this one, and Jack at the same time saying, I remember Karate Hottie getting it, stealing the Atom weight belt over with Invicta. That is true. I don't know. I mean, I don't see this fight, putting butts in seats. I don't see people buying their tickets for this one. I do have Tabatha Ricci. I think she has a wrestling advantage in the fight. And I think her striking at this point is just a little bit crisp. But I see people like, I've got this in my parlay. I'm really thinking about this one. Just pass the fight and move along. Because this one is tricky. The underdog, the older fighter, you look at the way that she goes out there for some of these. She can chain and go for a triangle to then go for an armbar.
And I think it'll be a clinch-heavy fight. Like, if you have a clinch-heavy fight, you can't be that confident in whoever wins it. Like, there's going to be a lot of 50-50 positions, and I think this fight's going to involve a lot of those. So, I do have Ricci because I think she is the more athletic out of the two. She does have youth on her side. But again, Pena has a ton of experience against some of the better fighters in the division.
All right, so we move into the next fight, Matt. Martinez missed the weight. He's going to be taking on Cody Saaiman, Cameron Saaiman. And for Cameron Saaiman, he didn't miss the weight, so we can get rid of Crashmore. But when you look at this fight, Matt, for Martinez, I was really excited for this fight for a few different reasons. Malone Hart with the super chat. Hit that like button, guys. But when you look at this fight, Martinez switched up his camp. He's not at Glory. He can't. So he's training at Main Street, Muay Thai, and boxing. And you look at that gym. You look at Crew Bob Perez. He coached last weekend in that Narulo Aliv fight, but it wasn't for Narulo.
I would have watched that last Brandon Moreno fight and just gone to save Saud. I would have been like, hey, I'm just going to you now. This is going to be a match made in heaven.
Well, for Martinez, he's getting ready at the boxing gym. He's looking to really accentuate on the wildness that he had before when he was training at Metro Fight Club in Houston. Like, he is a Texas guy. So Martinez, if he can get back to his winning ways, you look at the knockout win that he had on the looking for a fight against recently released but never fought Jose Johnson. So that was interesting. But if Martinez can get back to that against Saaiman kind of takes some time to get into his fights. I've seen him lose first rounds on the regional scene and contender series and in the UFC. And I've seen Saaiman have to bite down on the mouthpiece, get gritty, utilize his wrestling to win fights. That's why I have Cody Saaiman to win this fight. But when I look at this, Matt, even with Martinez missing weight by a pound, you don't like to see that. Like, why couldn't he cut the extra pound? But for Martinez, I like the camp switch. I like everything I heard in the interviews that I listened to leading up to this fight. Just, I don't like the weight miss, and his wrestling defense has always kind of evaded him in his losses, even though for Martinez, you look at the fight against Ronnie Lawrence, you look at the fight against Brandon Davis, like, second round, and then the third round against Lawrence, like, he comes on really strong. The power's still there.
And I think we stated a pretty good case for how Martinez could win this fight at the start of the week. Like, we gave him his flowers. He has crippling power, good hand speed. He throws unorthodox strikes. And for those reasons, that's a pretty difficult fight for any prospect. Now, Cameron Saaiman, for all the reasons you brought up, is very well-rounded, and he does have great striking in his own right. I just think I was very close for this fight. Let's say it was 55% Cameron, 45% Mana. But the weight miss has given me that extra, like, 10% confidence in Saaiman, I guess. So I still think it's a really close fight. It's a very dangerous fight for him. But I think this is one of those good fights to have on your resume. Like, you beat a guy like Martinez. most MMA fans are going to look at that and think like, wow, now you're going to be in the top 15 or
but
anything.
that's like Sean O'Malley beating Teco Quinones. You just got to get that win.
A little bit. And I'm not going to say it's like, I can't even think of another comparison. Just, that's a good win that you can look at in the future and kind of reference back to. So I do like Cameron in this matchup. It is a very difficult fight for him for just how dangerous Martinez can be.
Yeah, so it comes down to, are we going to see Cameron Saaiman go out there, utilize some of that wrestling? Because his base is kickboxing as a teenager, like when he was 12, 13. That's when he got involved in the kickboxing scene. He trains at Team CIT with Dricus du Plessis, who's also on this card. Saaiman is almost a 3-1 favorite in the matchup. And as we said, like, it felt weird at the start of the week. Saaiman, 65% over on Instagram have Saaiman to win. 35% with Amanda Martinez. I have Cameron Saaiman in the matchup as well. But it will be interesting to see this one. I mean, Wildcat Cameron can control Mana on the ground. I haven't seen it. It's hard to say. Malone Hart, y'all remember when there would be 200 people watching one of these? That's usually for the fight nights. When the pay-per-view cards come around.
525 though, only 80 likes. Come on, guys. Hit that thumbs up.
The folks really come out of the woodwork for this
like.
one. And Kyle, you guys should give your winner predictions before you look at Topology numbers. You seem to only pick the favorites in every fight. Kyle, oh boy, we only pick favorites. That's why they're favorites. Matt, in this matchup, Ian Machado, Garry, big prospect. Kermit the Frog bit his hand on the embeddeds. Bit his hand. Could you believe that?
Aye.
It was crazy. But Conor McGregor came around, gave him a hug, and then one of his kids put Kermit's mouth around Ian Machado, Garry's hand. So watch out for that. Sung Kenan, didn't hear a single peep out of him all week. Nobody talking about Sung Kenan. And boy, oh boy, is Sung Kenan a finisher. 89% of his wins are by finish. He swangs and bangs. He wrestles and fights. He out-wrestled Brad Riddell. And then he ended up getting knocked out, get hit in the body. He got knocked out in his last fight against Max Griffin. The co-main event to a Derek Brunson card now years ago. So a big opportunity and a y'all must have forgot for Sung Kenan. But they matched him up against the undefeated former Cage Warriors prospect. Ian Machado, Garry, the black belt in judo. You know the boxing pedigree that he possesses as well. That's what makes this fight fun because if you do have Sung Kenan pushing a pace, we've seen the back foot striking of Ian Machado, Garry even drop Gabe Green. That was kind of a surprise in that one.
And that was a really impressive performance. That really sold me a lot on Ian Garry and what his overall ceiling could possibly be in the UFC because Gabe Green's a pretty good fighter. He's well-rounded. He's a very tough fighter. He's very technical. Like, that's a very good win to have on your resume. That's why I do like Garry in this matchup, though. Because for Sung Kenan, can he make it a fun fight? Can he make it an interesting fight? Of course he can because he has great power. He has an insane finishing rate like you had mentioned. But Ian Garry excels in the type of fight that Sung Kenan has to have success in this matchup. So maybe Kenan can crack him with a big shot on the inside and it could shock really the world. I just think Ian Garry's the much bigger guy at this weight division and he's the bigger puncher too. So they do get into one of these one-for-one type of a fight.
I don't know if he's the bigger puncher in this one.
For Garry, he's so big. Like, Ian Garry has legitimate power with one shot. He doesn't need to set it up with combinations. Whereas Sung Kenan is a lot more 3-4 punches, and he's hurting you with the third and fourth shot. That's why I think Kenan's going to really struggle in the pocket in this matchup. Whereas Garry, his boxing is a little bit more crisp with some of his uppercuts. I feel like those are more one-shot power type shots.
And Scott B using that L word about Ian Garry. Should I be worried about his fight since he does get hit a lot and Kenan has KO power? Yeah, that's what I've said all week. And for me, when I watch these Sung Kenan fights, I mean, I see Clay saying, what's the best win? Hector Aldana. But even in the losses, Sung Kenan tends to invite the brawl.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see how it works out with him training at Team Alpha Male if he decides to kind of dip back into that pocket and pull out his wallet, and then there's a wrestling card in there. I don't know if we're going to see that out of Sung Kenan. But with Ian Machado, Garry, we've seen decent takedown defense in the past against guys like Darian Weeks. And we've seen him then be able to just kind of box from the outside, even with his length. So I'm going to go with Ian Machado, Garry on in this fight. It should be a big-time one in this welterweight division. And you probably get another one of those guys that's from 15 to 30 down. Because they're going on a slow build for Machado, Garry.
So yeah, this isn't the one that then gets him into the top 50.
Not at all. No. But when you talk about a fight that has some implications, you look at these two guys, and I know Marc-Andre Barriault, it's what, 2-5
I don't think this fight has a lot of implications.
2-4 with a no contest, but for Julian Marquez, this fight is the get back on the horse fight. And you talk about implications, you're going from fighting a guy that just won on Dana White's Contender Series, or you're going to fight a guy that's been around for a while, you're going to get a really fun fight out of it. You're going to either fight like I don't know, think of a middleweight. I'm thinking like next weekend you have Josh Fremd and Cedricus Dumas. You're going to fight one of those guys if you lose this fight.
If you lose this fight, you're fighting in Bellator. Like, I don't think you're around if you lose this fight.
It's a tough one. So we have Mr. Julian Marquez, who's on a win streak. He's got a lot of bonuses since he's been with the UFC. And his last time out, he got dropped 4 times by Gregory Rodriguez and finished in the first round, taking on Marc-Andre Barriault, a guy who has had high highs in the UFC. Like, I think of his fight against Oscar Piata, and then I think of his knockout loss to Chidi and Joe Kwani, or when he fought Anthony Hernandez, and it was just takedown city, and Barriault couldn't figure out the pace and the rhythm of that fight. So, a big opportunity for both of these guys. Finishing abilities definite in this one because Julian Marquez has never won a fight by decision, and Barriault has a lot of finished wins on his record as well. I know we split on the pick in this one, but it should be a fun fight between these two guys.
Yeah, I feel terrible about the Julian Marquez pick if you want the honest answer out of me. I just think he's the more damaging out of these two fighters because for Barriault, he does have two versions to himself. There is that kind of Bangkok ready where he's really going to go out there, try to be a damaging striker, and I think that version of him could get him caught against a guy like Marquez, who isn't a one-punch knockout guy by any means, but I would say he's the more damaging striker on the feet between these two. Does have good knees up the middle, very good up the middle strikes. And the thing about Marquez that I do like specifically to this matchup is if we do see Barriault go for a lot of takedowns, Marquez does threaten a lot with that head and arm choke and a lot with guillotines too. And I think that might deter Barriault for going for some of those takedowns, and especially going from like, you know, the 17, 18, 19 takedown attempt type fights that I think he might have to win this one. So I like Marquez, especially for where the odds are, but I don't think this is a fight that's going to tell us who's going to fight Alex Pereira next by any means.
Matt, over there in the comments section, Prince Vegeta's son Marquez disappointed me so much, and he's been high and low, and I wish he could have fought more over the years. Barriault open plus 128. He was a minus 127. He's a minus 145. So Barriault is the favorite. Marquez the underdog. I've seen a lot of fan support for Marquez this week, and I've seen a lot of fan support for Jalen Turner this week. Those are kind of the two guys that I went, we're planting our flag there. That's what we're going with. But in the matchup, if you have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one, Marquez, 62% of the votes and 38% was Barriault the favorite. So the fans have the underdog in Marquez. They don't necessarily have the favorite in Marc-Andre Barriault. And I have the pick on Barriault because I can see him going out there, grinding, just continuing to have success. Kind of like he did against Abu Zaitsar in that fight, whereas Marquez could burn a little hot and then the power bar. See what I did there? Goes down for Marquez, but both these guys entertain. It should be a really fun fight.
Oh, well, I think it'll be an entertaining one. I don't think it'll be a high-level one, though, by any means, but I do have Marquez.
You have Marquez, I have Barriault. Matt, we get into the next fight. Viviane Araujo was in a title eliminator main event. Now in the prelim, she's going to fight Amanda Ribas. Ribas ranked, 15th in this division. Ribas' last fight, unranked, coming up from strawweight, against the number one contender in the division, Katlyn Chookagian, and she lost that fight by split decision.
Maybe could account of herself.
I thought Chookagian won 2 of the rounds, and Ribas convincingly won the other one and came on strong as the fight went on. But for Ribas, now she gets that opportunity against Araujo. And with Ribas, I get nervous because I've watched that fight that she had over at Jungle Fights where she got finished. That old Polyana Viana fight. I watched that fight that she had against Marina Rodriguez where she got finished. And other than those instances, I mean, you got power, you've got grappling, you've got the complete package from Amanda Ribas. And with Viviane Araujo, if you watch the run that she had on the regional scene, you watch the fight against Toledo Bernardo, you're led to believe, and if you listen to certain people, she's this great big knockout artist. And then in Araujo's last 7 fights, they've all gone to decision, and she, not always, but 90% of every single one of an Araujo fight has gone to a decision. Viviane's lost the second round. So in this matchup, Matt, as Prince Vegeta's son says, top pick. This is definitely a top pick. And Pipe, or Pipe, is it Pipe or Pipe? You let us know. Ramirez saying, Ribas' striking defense is really bad. It's tricky. It's tricky sometimes. It evades.
Just say it's bad. Like, you can just be honest about it. You don't gotta say it's tricky. Ribas doesn't have good striking defense, and Araujo does have plus punching power. I think both those things are true. And that's why I could see Araujo dropping Ribas, maybe even getting a finish. I know it hasn't happened in a long time, but like, Vina Chandihoba dropped her with a jab, okay? Like, you could hurt Amanda Ribas. The thing about Araujo is she's really good when she's able to be set in her own rhythm. But if Ribas can disrupt her rhythm, especially with her kicks and with her movement, and she does move quite well on the feet, I think that will get Araujo out of that constant rhythm of combinations that she tends to throw. Now, if she's able to start landing the overhands, I think that will be a damaging enough strike to hurt Ribas. But I do think Ribas is the more active striker out of the two, and I think she'll be able to threaten enough with her takedown too, and I think that'll help her a lot with disrupting some of that rhythm I've talked about. Because if Araujo is able to just stay on the outside, throw the leg kick, throw the jab, and set up the right hook, she's probably going to be able to win this fight. I just think Ribas is going to be tricky enough with her level changes, I guess, and that should be able to get her the win.
Samuel Bacon saying too risky. 65% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Amanda Ribas in the matchup. She's ranked lower in the division. She is favored to win ever so slightly over Araujo. I have Amanda Ribas because of the threat of the takedown, but we've seen it from Araujo be able to thwart some of those attempts from her opponents in the UFC and show off some decent defensive grappling chops in these matchups. So should be a fun fight in this one, Matt. This one could be a main card of a fight night. I mean, or a main event. Derek Brunson, out of the recent fights, like I went through it and I talked about it at the start of the week, like from when he fought, it was the Canadian, the man, Elias Theodorou. That was a big time fight. And then from then on, all of the fights that he was in, like you look at it, we're talking co-main event Theodorou, Ian Heinisch on the main card of a pay-per-view, Shabazian main event, Holland main event, Till main event.
It was a big deal before
and then he fights Cannonier, and you look at that one, he loses. But for Derek Brunson, that was a title eliminator. Similar thing to like Viviane Araujo in the fight before this. So Brunson loses the title eliminator, and he said that was his second to last fight. So is this the last fight?
He also said he's going to fight 4 times this week. So I wouldn't put a ton of stock into what he said 3 fights ago.
It really is hard to say. Samuel, why do I feel like this is going to be a snoozer? I don't think this is going to be a snoozer at all. I think this is going to be a great fight.
You could be right. If Derek Brunson just out-wrestles him the whole entire fight, it could be a bit of a snoozer. I can openly admit that. Because Brunson, I think, will have to use his wrestling quite heavily in this match.
Yeah, but even in Brunson's wrestling matchups, like his fight against Shabazian,
he goes for a lot of ground and pound. But the thing is, if you go for a lot of ground and pound against a guy like Dricus du Plessis, that then gives him space to get his feet on your hips, kick off, and then get back up to his feet. And I just think Derek Brunson might realize how dangerous of a threat du Plessis is on the feet, to where he might just go wrestling for control's sake. And that's the thing about Brunson. He really has morphed himself into more of a wrestler over time, especially against the other elite levels of competition, and especially when he fights sort of the prospect who's trying to prove themselves against the elite fighter. And that elite fighter 9 times out of 10 in the middleweight division just so happens to be Derek Brunson. He really has been in this role for a long time now, and we've seen him succeed in it too. It's not just like every prospect with hype beats Derek Brunson, because there's some gatekeepers out there, and people don't like that term, but there's gatekeepers where it's a very positive thing. Like Derek Brunson, if you beat him, you're fighting for a title. He's that level of gatekeeper.
Yeah, I don't understand this whole conversation over there about Derek Brunson's gas tank. Derek Brunson's gas tank. You look at the 5-round fights that he was having, and the gas tank wasn't an issue in those fights. He fights Cannonier and almost finishes him in the first round and expends all that energy trying to finish him.
All the 5-round fights he was finishing because his opponent just had worse gas tanks than he did the majority of the time. Like, Derek Brunson's not some cardio king, I don't think. Like, he has gotten tired in a lot of his fights. The Yoel Romero fight, he gets tired and gets knocked out because of it. Like, there's a lot of fights where Derek Brunson gets tired. I don't think we can rip on the people for saying it. He gasses quite a bit in his fights as well. That's why I do think if this fight gets to the 3rd round where Derek Brunson's going for a lot of takedowns, du Plessis is getting back up to his feet, it might get a little sloppy by the time we do get around to that. I just think du Plessis is going to be damaging enough with a lot of his strikes. Derek Brunson doesn't recover all that well at this stage of his career. He has been hit by a lot of big shots. He's been in a lot of really tough fights. I just think that if du Plessis can get him hurt, I think he'll be able to finish him off of that initial game.
I think it's disrespectful to really knock the gas tank. And the second part about the equation is if Derek Brunson's wrestling is as good as we've seen, and we've seen it recently, Dricus du Plessis in some of the fights, and listen, he's won the majority of them. The fight against Gareth McLennan, it's a lot of the takedown, it's a continued just assault with the grappling, and that's how du Plessis loses that fight. And then in the fight against Roberto Soldic, he gets hit and clipped, and then he gets hit again and finished. But if you look at it for du Plessis, he holds such a high guard with his kickboxing, and he's a strange kickboxer because he is a former K1 champ, WAKO champ, but he holds his hands really high compared to everybody else that we really see. His fighting style, again, he's got that Jerry West. Like, if you showed somebody a silhouette of Dricus du Plessis outside of South Africa, I think people would recognize du Plessis at this point. They wouldn't Poland, they wouldn't South Africa, parts of the United States. But for du Plessis, I like the power, I like the just get up attitude that we've seen out of these fights, but both guys can struggle, at multiple points of their fights. And du Plessis is one of those guys, I touched on at the start of the week. Is it a Wim Hof breathing technique? Not necessarily.
He's breathed heavily.
But he is breathing heavily at the start of the fight. So a lot of people are going to knock that one. I have du Plessis, I guess ever so slightly, because I do respect the wrestling of a guy like Brunson. 65% in this matchup as well, going with Dricus du Plessis. But it should be a very, very fun fight as we move into a fight that makes no sense, being a curtain jerker for a pay-per-view, Matt.
Doesn't.
Cody Garbrandt is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Trevin Jones has looked bad in his last number of fights, but they put Trevin Jones back out there again. And listen, I can respect the skill set of Trevin Jones. Coming into the UFC, I didn't know what he was going to be. I knew he got taken down a lot on the regional scene. He had quite a few losses to his name. He was an older guy coming into the UFC, and he had to get taken down to open up his jiu-jitsu. And then in the UFC, you've got Timur Valiev, who's just floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee on the outside, takes a step in, hands are a little low, step in, and then Trevin Jones getting the finish. Mario Bautista, I could have sworn the younger fighter was going to win. He fights next weekend. And sure enough, there's Trevin Jones going out there and getting the finish. But if you look at these Jones fights and you look at the last 3 fights, his third to last fight and then his last fight, he lands 11 significant strikes against Barcelos and loses convincingly. And he fights Sadykhub Kakrakhmanov, who's taking the fight on very short notice, and lands 12 total shots. So if you look at it for Jones, incredibly low volume, even in the last 3 fights, incredibly negative strike differential. And for Jones, I'm sure his jiu-jitsu is better, or from what I've seen, his jiu-jitsu could be better implemented than a guy like Cody Garbrandt, who's had mythical wrestling in his back pocket for a long time.
We've never seen Cody Garbrandt get out-wrestled or out-grappled convincingly in an MMA fight. The only thing is, and this does piggyback off your point about Trevin Jones and his low volume, I like guys who are really technical and who have high volume fighting Cody Garbrandt. The thing is, Cody Garbrandt doesn't have like a Mark Hunt chin, right? You don't have to hit him with the biggest shot in the world to hurt him. But if you throw a lot at him, it gives you a lot of opportunities to put him down. That's why I like Kai Kara-France so much against him. Kai's a guy who has really good power, but what else does he have? Great output and picture-perfect technique to go along with it. I just don't know if Trevin Jones is going to give himself enough opportunities to put a guy like Cody Garbrandt out. Now, maybe Cody has developed a new style of fighting to where he is more defensive. He won't go out there and brawl as much. It's just really hard for me to sit here and believe that Cody Garbrandt's all of a sudden going to become something that I've never really seen him become throughout his UFC tenure. So unless Garbrandt does put on the wrestling shoes and just go out there and completely out-wrestle Trevin Jones, it's a wild thing to say, but I could see this being one of those fights that ends inside the distance, just because Trevin Jones, when it is an off night, he doesn't throw a lot. And if Cody Garbrandt's against an opponent who's not throwing anything back at him, for as many knocks as you want to have against Garbrandt, he is still a tremendously talented offensive striker.
Yeah, and he is. And if you look at it for Garbrandt, for about the last year, he's been at Extreme Couture, but he's been training with a guy that just does not like to wear the sleeve. Dewey Cooper. I mean, Black Cobra striking system. And Dewey Cooper, I mean, to his credit, he helped coach a world champion, Francis Ngannou, but I don't think he taught him how to wrestle. So in this matchup, Matt, the kickboxing coach and the lineage of a guy like Cooper with Garbrandt, not a team alpha male. For Trevin Jones, you know him at Drysdale, BJJ, Robert Drysdale. I mean, he beat Ryan Spann for an LFA title, and you know how good Drysdale is at actual jiu-jitsu from all the tournaments that he's won in his lifetime. He's one of the more accredited guys there. But for Jones, he trains there and at Fortis MMA, and you gave Saif Saud his flowers earlier. So I think this is a really fun fight.
It's like, when we talk about refs, for instance, like, reffing is going to be a big thing in the pay-per-view tonight. Like, do you know why I like Saif Saud? Because nobody he doesn't just, he's not like, hey, look at me, guys, I'm a good MMA coach. Like, the only time you ever hear about him is when one of his big fighters is on a card and somebody has to put a microphone in front of him. But you look at the work he's able to do with the athletes, and he does make improvements with them.
I mean, is Cody even in the rankings anymore? No, he's not.
That's the problem. Like, I saw BKFC as a card coming up with Luke Rockhold and Mike Perry and Eddie Alvarez and Chad Mendes. Like, I don't want to see Cody Garbrandt become a fighter who's then on one of those cards. Like, I really enjoyed Cody Garbrandt's rise to the top. He was one of these prospects who you kind of understood was given the benefit of the doubt promotionally. He was given a lot of big matchups. He was only fighting up in the rankings, but to his credit, he was checking all the boxes off. Like, he was beating the fighters he was supposed to beat. He destroyed Mizugaki, which got him the Dominic Cruz fight. And guess what? When he got that opportunity, he blew the doors off Dominic Cruz and looked amazing. So I have great respect for Cody Garbrandt, and it really is unfortunate to see him on this run in his career.
It has been tough for Cody Garbrandt, and most expect it's going to be tough for Jamie Pickett. Main card opener, the odds. Bo Nickel open minus 1,800 for the matchup. He's still about there. Matt, I don't know if I've seen odds that, like, Amanda Nunes, when she beat Juliana Pena, or when she fought Juliana Pena the first time, she wasn't that big of a favorite. Valentina has been in and around that kind of favorite in the past, like minus 1,500. But Bo Nickel, a giant favorite. And I saw Dan, Best Fight Picks, out there on Twitter saying, if somebody told you had to put $1,800 down to win $100, does that make sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. MMA, anything can happen.
Exactly.
And the sad thing for Jamie Pickett is he's been reduced to one highlight clip. Now, we said that on this channel. all the damn time. And it's like, oh yeah, but Jamie Pickett, like, think of all the other fights that he has. And then if you watch the build-up that anything the UFC's put out this week, you don't really see Jamie Pickett other than his fight against Jonathan Patti. His third fight on Contender Series, because he lost the first two. Pickett has that crazy 30-punch combo, finishes Patti. In the UFC, Pickett's 2-5. But when you look at this matchup, Matt, Pickett, he's enlisted the help of the All-American, Chris Weidman.
I was just about to say
He's training at Gym O with John Salter. You saw how good Joe Selecki looked just the other week
100%.
against Carl Deaton, a short notice call-up. So for Jamie Pickett, the camp to train with for this matchup, specifically for Bo Nickel. And for Bo Nickel, people are going to touch on the fact that from that long, rangy southpaw stance, the roundhouse kicks to the head, to the body, the big-time left hook that he has, doesn't really throw much of a jab, but the fights are over so darn quick that you don't get to see him establish those things. So I'd love to see Bo Nickel go out there and show us something new. I don't know if we will. I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to see that. But this is a big spot for a young guy to kick off a main card at 3-0, and his only fights as a pro were last year. It's just kind of wild that way.
I will say this, though. It's not like Bo Nickel's never been in a crowd full of people, though, or an arena full of people. Like, I don't think he will have some of those octagon jitters that some people do have, because I think octagon jitters, more than anything, speaks to sort of the crowd shock that you get when you finally do get into the big lights of the UFC. But the thing about Bo Nickel is, he's been getting ready for this for a very long time, and that's the good thing about Nickel. He's not just a prospect who gets the respect from the odds makers. Like, I've never really listened to Bo Nickel talk until this week. I can openly admit that. He's like a pretty interesting guy. Like, he's pretty, like, when you put a microphone in front of him, he says things that you want him to say, I guess. Like, you could see him being on UFC shows and whatnot, to where he could promote himself outside of just fight weeks and whatnot. I just don't like when even Chris Weidman, and you bring up his name, like, even Chris Weidman was like, it's a tough matchup for Jamie Pickett when Bo Nickel asked him.
Yeah, it's Sean V saying, Bo had a 52-second triangle choke win over a proven 7-1 pro Donovan Beard, the CFFC champ. Dude is the real deal. Donovan Beard had to come back in most of his fights in the regional scene, and he had bad takedown defense on the regional scene. That's not fair.
But Donovan Beard is a guy with experience, though, and the fact that Bo Nickel was, 2-0 at the time? Like, to fight a guy who has way more experience than you, we normally knock guys for fighting people who are 0-1, 0-2. The fact that he did fight a guy who is now the CFFC champion is pretty impressive. Like, Bo Nickel hasn't just beat nobodies, and he also has the foundational skill set of wrestling that's pretty much guaranteed to translate to MMA.
Mr. Guy saying college wrestling accolades being overblown. The guy's a 4-time All-American, 3-time D1 champ, Dan Hodge winner, and he didn't get it done when it came to the ultimate pinnacle of the Olympics.
Yoel Romero might be the only guy in, UFC history who has more wrestling accolades than a guy like Bo Nickel. And Bo Nickel can translate them into MMA, and I think that's what does make him so special. It's just, this, like you had said, beating a guy like Jamie Pickett in your debut, that's going to be a really big deal, especially for a guy making his debut, and it should justify his hype if he's able to look impressive.
Does Pickett have better takedown defense than Donovan Beard? He does. He doesn't have great takedown defense. I think it's better than Donovan Beard's takedown defense. But when I look at this matchup, Matt, the volume, if we're breaking this down skill for skill, the volume goes to Jamie Pickett. The power and the strikes, they might go to Bo Nickel. The wrestling advantage obviously goes to Bo Nickel. The jiu-jitsu might go to Bo Nickel just out of pure strength. Like one of those white belts that goes into class that wants to show somebody something, but he also weighs 265. So
but he also has 3 national champions. Like, there's a lot of crossover between jiu-jitsu and wrestling. It's not just like jiu-jitsu moves are in one space and wrestling moves are in another. Like, there's a lot of crossover. So Bo Nickel, for just MMA grappling, he might not have a black belt, but think of it this way. Like, Khabib Nurmagomedov has, a purple belt in jiu-jitsu? I think that's kind of silly, though. Like, he can go out there and submit anybody no matter what belt they are. So don't get too caught up in that.
I do have Bo Nickel in the matchup. I won't spend a lot more time on it. It's going to be the fight that you're going to find to kick off the main card. You can find us there. John Jones looking at Sid Ogan, us going wild. A big-time fight on the sidekick later on tonight. So, Matt, we move into the next one, Matt. Mateusz Gamrot taking on Jalen Turner. The fans this week, they love the win streak of Jalen Turner, who's the underdog in the matchup. But Jalen Turner was in camp for this fight. He was getting ready for a different opponent. And all of a sudden, just, in the 11th hour, Mateusz Gamrot ends up getting the fight. So I want to talk about that because that's a big angle into this one if you do consider it. But you look at the super chat there from Malone Hart. Mark Madsen's a great wrestler too. Didn't get nearly pushed like this. I don't understand the push right off the bat. Can y'all explain it to me? He's a lot more dominant than Mark Madsen. Like a lot more, and he's a lot younger too.
Mark Madsen was an Olympic medalist.
Yeah, Mark Madsen came into the UFC in his mid-30s.
I know, but you can't say. But you just said he was a lot more. Like, I don't think you can say he's more dominant than the guy who won the Olympics. Like, Mark Madsen's super impressive. They're just different. And, like, I would say it's much more age than the fact that Mark Madsen wasn't as good at wrestling as Bo Nickel. It's just Bo Nickel's a younger guy, and he's been building towards this for a long time. We knew about Bo Nickel and how he wanted to transition to MMA far before he ever came to the UFC.
So in this matchup, Gamrot replaces Dan Hooker. He's got a back piece. Does he have a leg piece now? Like, he's just going wild with the tattoos. Yeah. Like his mom said, okay, Dan, you're old enough now. You can get tattoos. And he's just going to go buck wild with it. But in the matchup, Gamrot takes the fight on short notice, and it was announced February 14th. Gamrot, a guy that's known 5-round fights. I mean, a former double champ over the KSW. He's had a main event in the UFC against Arman Tsarukyan. Won that main event. Controversially, I guess. His last time out, he loses his second fight in the UFC. The first loss was against Guram Kutateladze by split decision. The last time out, he got dropped by Beneil Dariush. Gamrot struggles against southpaws in the UFC. They're noted. Jalen Turner, southpaw. Jalen Turner, bigger. Jalen Turner hits harder. Jalen Turner, the fans are there, Matt. Fans are there.
Jalen Turner's like Ryan Howard in the MLB. He's going to play on the extremes. Like, the things he does extremely well are really going to overshadow some of the weaknesses in his games. But like you said, the things that he does extremely well. He has absurd power on the outside. He is a range that really nobody is in the lightweight division. And I think that really does make him unique because he's striking down at such an angle that, like, it's a weird thing. It must be difficult to bring in training partners for a guy like Jalen Turner because you're going to have to go up to the welterweight division and the middleweight division probably just to get somebody physically who, like I said, can match up with him frame-wise. I think Jalen Turner's strengths can outshine Gamrot, especially on the feet. We have seen Gamrot get hurt, not even his last time out against Tsarukyan, even in the Guram fight. We saw Guram hurt him on numerous occasions. Now, what I do like out of Gamrot is when he gets hurt, he will transition into his wrestling very effectively. He does have a bit of that Kevin Lee in him, and that's a weird fighter to bring up because Gamrot's in a much better place in his career, I'd say. But once he gets hurt, he's not a guy who's just going to try to pop up to his feet. I know he's back.
They're both UFC fighters.
But the thing I do like about Gamrot is once he does get hurt, he is going to transition into that wrestling. And I just don't know if Jalen Turner's wrestling defense has been able to catch up to where Gamrot is at this stage of his career. Is Turner the guy he was when he came into the UFC? I don't think so whatsoever.
No.
I think he has been able to make a lot of improvements since that time. I just don't know if he's been able to get up to that point just yet. But I will say this. I think Jalen Turner can beat guys in the top 15. I think he can be around in the top 15 for a long time. I wasn't necessarily sold on him, and maybe the Brad Riddell fight wasn't long enough for us to get a really good sample size as to how he's going to look against other top-level guys. But he was so damn impressive with his striking ability on the outside to go right into the submissions. I just really like what I've seen out of Turner. I just don't know if he's experienced enough to beat a guy like Gamrot.
Well, apparently he TKO'd a BJJ coach of OJ, so that's weird. He's just TKOing BJJ guys. That's not fair. But when you do look at this one, Matt, like, it is a really fun fight. Turner's finished his last 5 opponents. You look at that last win, Brad Riddell, who's coming off a recent finish loss. That was a little bit of a weird fight. He finished Jamie Mullarkey, finished Uros Medic, who is Joe Rogan's favorite fighter, for 5 minutes. Finished Brock Weaver.
He just walked through those
He's still with Icon FC, and he finished Joshua Kulibau, took the fight on short notice up a weight class. Lost to Frivola, lost to Vicente Luque, which Turner took that fight on short notice up a weight class. So for me, I still have the lingering cobwebs of the Jalen Turner fight where he lost to Matt Frivola because he got outboxed at short range and taken down quite easily. And Frivola could hold him down, and you wouldn't think the smaller guy in Frivola, and I know Matt Frivola is a good wrestler, but the smaller guy in Frivola was able to hold down the much bigger Jalen Turner, who had that length and reach advantage, and he couldn't.
Yeah, but if you're tall, you're weaker, though, just because weight cutting, everybody's going to weigh the same, so if you're shorter, you have more muscle. Think about Turner, but you can admit this, though. If Turner hits him with, like, a Tommy Hearns backup uppercut and knocks out Gamrot, I wouldn't be that surprised. I know we brought up the fact that Gamrot hasn't been TKO'd in the past, but, like, Gamrot doesn't have one of those chins where I'd think, oh, he's never going to get knocked out. Like, I've seen him get hurt in enough of his fights to where, okay, if Turner hits him with a big enough shot, I think he can stop him by.
Yeah, this is my point at the very start of the video. I mean, you think about the fight against Guram, 3rd round, overhand left, that drops Mateusz Gamrot. The fight that he has against Tsarukyan, who was a southpaw, it was a spinning back fist. The fight against Beneil Dariush, southpaw, it was another left hand that dropped him in that matchup. So when you look at these fights and you look at Mateusz Gamrot, he struggled against big-time opponents who were southpaws, and he's been dropped by 3 of them, all inside of the UFC. So really, really tough one to look at there. Young Mix, better see the tarantula with Joe on Joe's head at the end of the bout. I don't know if they let Jalen bring his tarantulas from California to Nevada.
I'm freaked out by spiders. I can admit that. Snakes don't bother me. No legs, no problem. Lot of legs, lot of problems. That's the way I look at it.
And then the other conversation that's going on out there, could Greco-Roman wrestling help you? Randy Couture was pretty darn good at Greco-Roman wrestling, and he won a couple of titles in the UFC. I have Mateusz Gamrot in this matchup, but again, it feels like he's way too big of a favorite against Jalen Turner in the matchup, because Gamrot's more than a 2-1 favorite.
Well, short notice, too.
Taking the fight on short notice, so that's what feels weird to me. And the fan vote on this one, 62% with Gamrot at Fight Night Picks. So it weirds me out that he's that big of a favorite, and that many people have him, yet the comment section is like a wildfire with Jalen Turner.
I mean, it's easy to get excited about Jalen Turner. He finishes people. Like, he stops people with chokes and with knockouts. He's a pretty exciting guy. But I just think Gamrot, like I said, experience against high levels of competition and just having a really well-rounded game.
Matt, almost 800 people tuning in to UFC 285. Again, we have the sidekick later on tonight, but if you toss us a like, it's much appreciated. If we get over 300, I'll shoot some of the Dustin Poirier hot sauce right now. How about that? Matt, we'll move into the next fight. Jeff Neal weighs 175. When I saw that, I texted you with it. It surprised me so much. Because this fight was supposed to happen months ago, and then it fell out, and they rebooked it for this pay-per-view card. Of course, Shavkat Rakhmonov, 171. He's 16-0. 8 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission.
Balanced as all things should be.
Very, very balanced. So, obviously, we like the fact that he made the weight. Shavkat wants to fight with Khamzat eventually. I want that fight, but Jeff Neal wants to play spoiler, as Jeff Neal did against Vicente Luque's last time out. For Neal, it's kind of been a slow progression back to the old guy that we knew, because he had the life-altering medical conditions. It was like a Brian Barberena story. And then all of a sudden, Neal comes in, he loses 2 in a row. We're really scratching our heads. But his last 2 wins, he's looked good. Split decision win against Santiago Ponzinibbio. And then he convincingly beat Vicente Luque. Finished him his last time out. So Jeff Neal running a heater in those fights. And for Shavkat, I mean, running the table.
Shavkat's as dominant as, like, any prospect we've seen. And he didn't really come to the UFC as a prospect. Again, M1 global champion, so, like, being a champion of another organization, coming over to the UFC, you're not really a prospect like everybody else is. But he was just so dominant. The thing was, all of the skills that we saw in M1 translated immediately to the UFC. I was worried in the Prazeres fight that we might see him get out-grappled at some points, because Prazeres is a guy who might not get all the glitz and glam, but he beat Gilbert Burns all the way back when.
Prediction Shark, I gotta say, that's a silly thing to say. Jeff Neal pulls off the upset, gave up 20% of his salary to feel awesome. Prediction Shark, he gave 30%. Up 30%, and you're ineligible awesome. For a bonus now, so way to go. Good move, Jeff.
I don't know about the bonus thing, but, like, for Jeff Neal, I just think he was probably injured in camp. Like, that's what I always go to. If you miss weight by a lot, I don't think Jeff Neal's a guy who couldn't handle cutting the weight. I don't think he's not a professional by any means. I think he's both of those. I just worry that something happened during camp that prevented him from getting a full training camp and getting into the best shape possible. That's immediately what I always think about when guys do miss weight by the 3, 4, 5 pounds. And I already thought this was going to be a difficult matchup for him. We know how good Jeff Neal is in the striking, but let's say Jeff Neal has even a 5-10% advantage in the striking. I still think Shavkat can hang with him on the feet.
You have no idea if Jeff Neal was hurt, though.
No,
it's pure speculation.
I know. I just said that. I always think that when a guy misses weight by 3, 4, and 5 pounds, they normally get hurt in camp. That's all I said.
You don't know.
I know! I just said, though. That's all I'm thinking. That's normally what I go to when guys miss weight by a lot. I assume something bad happened in camp. Do you think Jeff Neal showed up on fight week and said, I'm not cutting the weight?
It doesn't make sense to me. It just does not make sense to me.
But I'm just trying to make sense of it. That's all I'm trying to do.
Maybe he was sick the day before the fight. Who knows?
Okay, so there was something bad that has happened to him in the last few weeks that has prevented him from cutting the weight. That's something we can all agree on.
I don't know.
Then why did he miss weight by 4 pounds? It's not like everything perfect happened to him.
Maybe he'll say tomorrow. I have no idea.
My whole point is, Jeff Neal, if everything would happen to him right in life, I thought this would be a difficult fight for him. Now it is, he could be sick and miss weight because of it. He could have been hurt. We're just bringing up more reasons now. I just think this is a very difficult fight for Jeff Neal. Well, you always push back when I bring up that point, and I don't know why.
You have no idea what happened in his life.
No, but he missed weight by 5 pounds. That's significant enough.
That's by 4.
Craig, he fights at 170. Sorry, I said he missed by 5 pounds. It's something a lot of people talk about.
The best part about it is,
if you miss weight by a lot, it's normally...
Lucky day. Are we off Neal now? We were off Neal before. Both of us going with the very, very dominant Shavkat Rakhmonov in the matchup. Matt, we got to bring the fire for Shevchenko versus Grasso.
I'm pretty fired up already.
Shevchenko versus Grasso. I have no strong thoughts about Alexa Grasso winning this matchup, other than the fact that we have seen an uptick in aggression in the last couple of fights. We saw a very, very steady 5 rounds her last time out, so a good opportunity for her to get ready. 5-round atmosphere, 125 for a fight against Valentina Shevchenko, and obviously that big submission win that she had against Joanne Wood. But for Valentina, she's been really intense this week. Really, really intense. From all the things that I've read, maybe they've seen a weakness like this in my game. Maybe they've seen a weakness like that. But I can go out there and flip the script, turn the tables on my opponent. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Shevchenko go out there with a grapple-heavy game, training in Japan, getting ready for the matchup. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Brando is saying, imagine if Grasso subs her. I think that would be crazy.
Insane. It would be along the lines of, Verdum subbing Fedor, though. It would be that type of an upset, I think. Because I think it is fair to say Shevchenko has lost a bit off of her game. I don't think we are seeing prime Shevchenko. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm speculating there, too. Hopefully that's okay. But the reason I say that is, she was dominating everybody. There wasn't even a close fight at 125 up until her last one. Now, I understand, we brought it up, Jennifer Maia was able to have some success in her matchup. But for the vast majority, you look at the fight against Jessica Andrade. Andrade was as dominant of a contender as we had seen fight Valentina. And Valentina made that fight look trivial.
Will Alexa Grasso have more success than Jessica I had in her title fight?
It's difficult not to. The thing about Grasso is she is so technical, so it is going to be difficult to finish Alexa Grasso. I was talking to one of my friends about this the other day. He was asking me about Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao. I don't know why, but why I said that fight was so boring was, when two guys are that technical, it's kind of hard to knock each other out because you're not making a lot of mistakes. And for Grasso, she's not somebody who's going to leave herself wide open in a lot of her striking, so it's going to be difficult for Shevchenko to do what she did to Jessica I by setting her up with a lot of those body kicks to then open up the head kick. So I do think Grasso can have some success on the feet. The problem is, off of her back, she is one of these shutdown grapplers where a lot of her success is going to try to come from that open guard, full guard, where it's a closed guard. She's really trying to hold her opponent. That was the Achilles heel for Alexa Grasso in a lot of her earlier career, and we have seen her implement more submissions and at least be more active off of her back, I'll say. I just don't know if it's enough at this stage of her career to be able to threaten to really submit a fighter at Shevchenko's level, who's so heavy in that top spot.
And it's got to be awkward when you're the UFC and you go out there one week and you're like, listen, Tatiana Suarez, first fight in 3 years. Look at how she beat Alexa Grasso, and then the next week to go, hey, Alexa Grasso's fighting for a title. She's a really, really good fighter now. So forget about that fight that we just used to pump somebody else up with. Matt, Grasso, the underdog. Shevchenko, the favorite at Fight Night Picks. We have a look. And Matt, the total votes on this one, 91% now, with Valentina Shevchenko to get the win. I just like the well-roundedness in the matchup, and that's why I like Shevchenko. Her stand-up is very, very good. She can switch stances. She throws kicks more so than somebody like Alexa Grasso.
There's, 2-3 fighters in the division that you could arguably make a case that are more deserving to be in this title fight.
Yeah.
And I know for Blanchfield, she hadn't really justified it until after this fight was announced, but still, there are other fighters that I do think have a more compelling case to beating Valentina.
Fiorot was kind of a head scratcher that she didn't get the opportunity over somebody like Alexa Grasso, but we're here, we're ready, and we're set, Matt, for a 248-pound John Jones to go out there and fight for the first time in about 3 years. Now, Jones, main event, heavyweight title. It's the undisputed belt because Francis Ngannou left it by the wayside, and I can't stand that. I hope he's front row. I hope he's center. I hope he gets shown at least once on camera because on the countdown, it's like Ciryl Gane. He fought for the belt to unify it. And they don't show Francis at all. They show Ciryl looking dejected, and they don't mention Ngannou. So.
Also, Carmen Sandiego is easier to find than Stipe Miocic. I know he was doing some press conference the other day, but this is the thing that has made no sense to me lately. Where is Stipe and what's he been doing? He is arguably the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time.
Non-speculation? Fighting fires.
I don't know why he got so... This whole thing is speculation. We speculate about the fights and who's going to win.
Well, he's fighting fires.
I just don't know why you come at me with that. That's why I got so fired up. I think Ciryl Gane is one of the best athletes we have seen in the heavyweight division. He's a guy who can bounce on his feet, and he has some of the athletic X factors that we don't often see. Because what do we talk about with heavyweights? It's, hey, this fight can be great until it gets past the first or second round. But Ciryl Gane isn't hampered by a lot of those things. He has good cardio. At least I would say steady cardio. We'll be curious to see how he matches up with a guy like John Jones, especially if he is defending a lot of takedowns, because Ciryl Gane's not a guy who was really able to out-grapple, especially a guy like Francis Ngannou was last time out. And I've seen a lot of people in the chat point to the fact that, hey, John Jones wasn't able to take down Thiago Santos or Dominic Reyes, and I'm a little I'm worried about the Santos fight, if I'm being honest. I think that is a good point to bring up. I just think Dominic Reyes has really good takedown defense. And I know just because I'm saying it doesn't mean I'm right, but Dominic Reyes, up until that point in his career, had been proven quite difficult to take down. So I'll just be curious to see how much defense Ciryl Gane can
talk
offer.
about speculation, and we are the last guys to talk about it. But John Jones in the pool, Chael Sonnen was all over that. Everybody was all about Ciryl Gane and his hand looking weird after hand surgery. And then doctors were out there saying, no, don't worry about it. And listen, I mean, you're getting ready and you're recovering going into a fight. So I got nothing on any of that. But what I do have on the matchup, Matt, the first thing, somebody said John Jones with his airbrushed abs. Guys, that's the graphic that we use at the start of the week.
That's light heavyweight.
And then I just changed the weights. I talked about it at the start of the video. And then the second part about this fight, Matt, both of these guys, very, very similar in size, half a pound of difference between them on the scales. The other thing about this, they were two of the later guys to weigh in. You get that 3-hour window, why show up and be the first one?
Exactly.
I would wake up, have some Gatorade or whatever, and get your day.
Well, it's not like other guys cutting weight. Like, at heavyweight,
Prime.
I don't care.
They drink Prime now, whatever
But
that
it's
is.
the one weight class where we don't, like, I don't care what you weigh in at heavyweight. As long as it's not something that's outrageous compared to the last time you weighed in at. And of course, with Ciryl Gane, I don't think he's going to balloon up into weight and look like Derek Lewis the next time he weighs in.
The weird thing, too, about this is, and we saw the progression of Francis Ngannou's grappling from the fight against Stipe to then the fight against Ciryl Gane. Gane's going to be working on that at MMA Factory. There was the question marks around Gane's training at the start of the week. The fact that he said he was lazy and he didn't really train until he signed a bout agreement. For John Jones, been getting ready for the fight for 3 years with guys like Maurice Green, Jorgen De Castro. Walt Harris is thick now. I don't think he can make heavyweight tomorrow.
You're right about that, but I would say this. Walt Harris, I don't think Walt Harris is a terrible guy to train with for Ciryl Gane for this reason. Walt Harris is really light on his feet for how big he is. Because I kind of rolled my eyes at that promo, too. It's like, really, these are the three fighters we're going to highlight John Jones with?
He's trained with those guys for a long time.
Oh, yeah, but just Walt Harris specifically, though, had really fast feet for how big he was in the division. I know he was known a lot for his early knockouts, and of course, that's the thing that is highlighted. But the one thing that I always liked about Harris was it wasn't just his hands. He would square up his feet almost into, like, a boxing stance and kind of rush guys that way. And I do think training with a guy like that could help you a little bit with a guy like Ciryl Gane.
And it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, for me, like, you look at the way that Ciryl Gane moves at heavyweight, nobody else moves like him.
No,
like,
exactly.
side to side, left to right, front to back, he can strike it every different angle. And then the best part about it is for Gane, everybody just complains about the takedown defense against Ngannou. It's ingrained in your memory because he wasn't able to win a belt. That's the biggest fight of Ciryl Gane's entire career. And wrestling defense didn't work against a guy who's not known as a wrestler. But the offense comes into play as well in certain Ciryl Gane fights. And you saw that with TKO. You saw that in the UFC. You saw that against, in multiple wins that Ciryl Gane has in the UFC. Not just the Don'Tale Mayes fight that Gane was able to go out there and get the submission win. But he also has the win against Rafael Pessoa by triangle choke in his UFC debut after beating Souza by finish with TKO. So
we just haven't seen it against a lot of top-level guys. That's the only thing that I worry about with Gane's grappling against guys in the top 15. We've seen it against guys who are outside the top 15. But when he's fighting the best fighters in the world, we don't see him go for takedowns. It is mostly his kickboxing and his movement.
And it is so good. And then when you look at it for John Jones with the striking, I mean, this is a guy that can get it done at long range. He can get it done at boxing range. He always had the longest reach at light heavyweight, but you look at it, he does have a slight reach advantage in this matchup. Only 1.5 inches, and that's not something that Jones would see very often.
Well, plus the fingers, though, you got to keep.
And you look at John Jones, always got those fingers out, so I'm sure, and now I don't know who the referee is for the main event. They're going to say something.
I hate it.
Fighter meeting, because John Jones loves to poke. And the craziest finish, they were going out there showing the craziest finishes for everybody this week. And for me, it's like John Jones breaks his toe and then keeps fighting against Chael Sonnen.
I think the Machado one is just awful to watch.
And then he walks off like nothing happened. Like, where's the fight? But yeah, some crazy finishes for John Jones. But we don't know exactly what he's going to look like after this long away. After 3 years away, up at 265. We don't know if his movement's going to be there. We don't know how good his offensive wrestling is going to be.
Exactly.
So I do have John Jones, like, ever so slightly, but folks, this is going to be a very tightly contested fight, and it's honestly hard for me to make a prediction this one, because I could definitely see Ciryl Gane going out there, thwarting some of the takedown attempts with his movement, because Dominic Reyes, first 30 seconds in the fight at UFC 247, Jones rushes in across the cage, arms out, goes for the takedown, Dominic Reyes, whoop, and then defends the first one, and was able to implement his striking until Reyes started to tire as the fight goes on, and that's where Jones was able to pull away. Gane's not a guy that falls off that cliff as the fights go on. He stays on that bike in these fights.
He does win the fights at his pace, but again, that's why I keep on bringing up. I'm going to be curious to see what Gane's cardio is going to look like. If he is in the clinch a lot, if he is defending a lot of these takedowns, because at range, using his defensive striking, he is very good. We saw that a lot in the Volkov fight. But again, even we bring up the Rosenstrike fight as a fight that was a little bit underwhelming, but he did what he had to do to win. Gane can sometimes be a little bit timid on the back foot. I think he's going to have to be aggressive against a guy like Jones and really try to damage him. The conversation around Jones for a lot of his career is how thin his legs have been, and that's what people always say, just kick him in the legs. Like, that's what it is. Like, nobody's ever thought kick John Jones in the legs until like 50 years into
Matt
his
Hamill
career.
thought about it, but then he just took the 12-6.
But for Gane, I really do think the kicking range is going to be important for him. I know it's going to also allow Jones to be able to throw kicks. We know how good he is at that range, but Gane is so talented with his own repertoire of kicks that I think it's going to be really important for him to fight the fight at that range. But this fight just has so many question marks. It's a really entertaining one, and again, like I've said all week long, anytime you have a John Jones or a Conor McGregor, one of these big stars fighting, no matter what you feel about them as a fan, the card feels way bigger, and it's one of those really exciting fight weeks. So I'm really excited for this pay-per-view card.
And goodness gracious, if anything happens, because we've seen main events fall out recently. You saw Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak fall out the day of the fight. You saw last time out, I mean, Ryan Spann was supposed to take on Krylov. Now they're fighting next weekend. If anything happens, Sergey Pavlovich weighed in successfully. So 259 for a big guy. And even next weekend, Matt, we have a big-time fight. Not just the fact that there's a sidekick tonight, but next weekend, Marab taking on Piotr Yan in the main event. So a giant fight there for sure in that fight night. Big time fight night card coming up for next weekend. Somebody's tuning in. Sam from Antigonish, Nova Scotia. Home of St. FX, Antigonish, Nova Scotia. Some really good restaurants there. The only restaurant that's open late, like Monday, Tuesday, Boston Pizza in Antigonish, if you're looking for somewhere to eat.
How many late night places you going on a Tuesday?
Just about every week. Just about every single week. Matt, we kick it back to the start of the card. You got to thank everybody for tuning in. We do appreciate you. The likes are appreciated. The super chats are off the chart. Again, the sidekick coming up later on tonight for that main card. You can tune in and watch the fights with us. And somebody said earlier, will Craig have a Molson? Well, Craig will have a Molson on that show. But when we look at this matchup, a very, very fun fight between these two guys. Loik Radzhabov taking on Esteban Ribovics. I'm going to go with Radzhabov in the matchup.
I also have Radzhabov.
All right, next matchup. I love the folks that say this sometimes. Prediction Shark, did you pick any underdogs? I picked one of the bigger ones. Damon Blackshear taking on Farid Basharat. I'm going Blackshear in the matchup.
I like Basharat in this one.
All right, Matt. The next fight, we have Penne versus Ricci. I'm going to go with Ricci. I don't feel good about it, but I'm going with Ricci.
I've also got Ricci, but if she wins this one, it'll have to be a real big step up in competition the next time out, I think.
Angela Hill has to defend Penne's honor.
Angela Hill, it's been a while since she's looked good.
She won recently, but Martinez taking on Cameron Saaiman. I've got Cameron in the matchup.
I do, but this is a really difficult fight for him. This is one of those fights that won't get him a lot of headlines if he wins, but beating a guy like Martinez is a great fight to have on your resume, so I do have Saaiman.
MPTV on a Tuesday. John Wells is tuning in from Sydney, Australia. Matt, both of us going with Saaiman in the matchup. In this one, we have Ian Machado, Garry, Kenan. I think Kenan could wow some people because obviously you're undefeated. You're the talk of the town. You're the next Irish star. You're hanging out with the star of the reboot of Roadhouse. It's Ian Machado, Garry. I do have him, but if Kenan goes out there and puts the wrestling shoes on and lands some power shots, Kenan could win this fight.
I have Ian Machado, Garry, though. I think he's probably going to be able to win this one by finish. I think these guys are going to stand in the pocket, and it'll be a very fight of the night style fight.
Marquez taking on Marc-Andre Barriault, going with Monsieur Canadien Marc-Andre Barriault.
Just feel terrible about picking Marquez, but I am. I think he's more likely to finish between these two. I really do believe that. I know Barriault has looked more like a finisher as of late, but Marquez can threaten with the guillotine. He is good with his attacks at the middle. He's got good knees too, and I think for those reasons, again, that's why I have him.
All right, Matt. The next one, we have Araujo, Ribas. This is another one. I don't have a strong feeling around it. I have Ribas because I think maybe she can go out there, mix it up, make it interesting. Araujo, steady boxer, and looked very steady in that fight that she had her last time out. And I actually have, even though it's a loss on her record, a more positive appreciation for Viviane Araujo to keep that pace throughout the fight, where we've seen her kind of up and down throughout her career as these decisions have gone on. And I don't know where that accent came from. Gone on. And when you look at it too, the thing with Araujo is peaks and valleys, but she's only lost a couple of these decisions. So it is tough to have that argument. I like what I saw to Araujo the last time out. I'll go with Ribas in this one, though.
It's for Araujo. The peaks and valleys are all very set. everything she does is in like a very similar kind of technique and flow, and I think if you disrupt that flow, you can have a lot of success. And I do think Ribas, if she can threaten with her takedown enough, that should help her enough in the striking department. But this should be a fun fight. I'll be curious to see what the winner of this gets, because the division really is broken up into like 4 number 1 contenders and then the field right now. So I'll be curious to see what a win gets in this division.
We've got Malmo in the house as well as Stockholm. Matt, they say Swedish is very close phonetically with English, and that's why you see so many hockey players have a lot of success with their English when they come over to North America. I'm thinking
Didn't know any
Nick
of that until right
Lidstrom,
now.
Gabriel Landeskog, so maybe one day I will learn Swedish. But Matt, what I will learn is the fact that we could have a middleweight contender, a new one in this division.
100%.
And we saw a guy send Darren Till out of the UFC on technique alone, I guess. I mean, Dricus du Plessis going out there and showing a lot of heart, beating Darren Till. Till now released. He asked for it. Derek Brunson, a tough, like top tier gatekeeper. We'll see if Brunson can go out there, push the pace, utilize his wrestling, which is kind of where the defensive lapses come into play for du Plessis, who's been hittable in the UFC too. You can't forget that Maluco Perez fight where he got banged on and then he banged back. Try have du Plessis here.
You know when you had to run laps in high school gym at the start, like for 2 minutes?
Jake's saying you won't learn Swedish. I did a German class too.
And one class means that you know the whole language.
The whole thing.
The thing for Dricus du Plessis is he just reminds me of that one tryhard kid from that like 2-minute lapse. Like he's gonna sprint every second for those 2 minutes, even though there is zero incentive to whatsoever. He is going to go full blast. It's kind of you can't compare him to Giannis because Giannis is like one of the best basketball players ever. But that's what makes Giannis so special. He's gonna go as hard in a preseason game against the Orlando Magic as he will in the finals. And Dricus du Plessis does kind of have that engine to him, and I think that'll really help him in this matchup against Derek Brunson, because Derek Brunson is tough if nothing else. He's going to offer kind of the opposite of whatever your strength is. I just don't know how much durability he has at this stage of his career, and that's why I like Dricus.
I mean, we have a Swedish teacher out there, so now it's getting lit. Maybe there will be a path to Sweden. Matt, Cody Garbrandt taking on Trevin Jones. I'll go with Garbrandt.
Garbrandt's definitely the better fighter on his best day. I think that's fair to say. The guy did win a UFC title. The thing is, how many of those days does he still have left? Cody Garbrandt reminds me a little bit of Luke Walton at the end of his career. Like in his prime, he was an MVP, won finals MVP. At the end of his career, he was still good with the Celtics, but he was coming off the bench. He wasn't really the same guy that he used to be. And for Garbrandt, it hasn't necessarily been the injuries or the age. It's just been the damage throughout MMA. And I guess the injuries have played quite a big factor too. Remember the back injury he had when the whole Dillashaw rivalry was going on? So for Garbrandt, I'll be very curious to see what version of him we do get, but I still have him in the pick.
Do you think, going back to the last fight, do you think Dricus du Plessis would do well in the beep test, or would he be out by like the 4th beep?
He tried to. That's the thing. He'd get to the line, wait like 5 seconds, and then the beep would go, and he'd be like, okay, I'm kind of feeling this right now. So Dricus has like 11 good sprints into him, and that's it.
All right, Bo Nickal's taking on Jamie Pickett, going with Bo Nickel.
Got Bo Nickel.
Gamrot versus Turner. The fans have Turner, and I respect that. I'm going Gamrot here.
And again, yeah, there's no shade in a Turner pick. Like, you could definitely sell me a very good case as to why Jalen Turner's going to win this fight. He has incredible punching power, really good technique. I just think Gamrot has the experience, and I think that'll really matter.
All right, then we have Jeff Neal taking on Shavkat Rakhmonov, going with Shavkat in the matchup.
I've been saying Shavkat Rakhmonov's realness for a while now. I wanted him to fight Hamzat like a year and a half ago. Check the record, bud, to quote Uriah Faber, so I do have Shavkat Rakhmonov.
All right, then we have Shevchenko Grasso, going Shevchenko.
Grasso hopefully on the feet can make it competitive, but I do have Shevchenko.
And then in the main event of the evening, John Jones doesn't look like this anymore. Cyril Gane does. In his last fight, he weighed 247.
Are we hoping for the same thing?
He weighed half a pound more. I hope it's a really competitive fight for 5 rounds, and this is going to sound
to face adversity.
It'd be cool if it went to a decision. It was really close. How wild would that be? A crazy fight, and then it goes to a really close decision, and if Gane wins, and if Jones wins, Jones wins. Now, I have Jones ever so slightly, but I don't know what he's going to look like.
What's the non-Disney movie ending to this?
Cyril Gane goes out there, throws a head kick on a John Jones takedown entry, like goes for a body kick, Jones' head eats a shin, and then he's out.
That would be wild, like a Marlon Moraes, Aljamain Sterling type deal.
Exactly.
I would say that could be a very interesting ending to this fight. I think Cyril Gane hopefully just makes John Jones face adversity, because that's been the thing about John Jones. Even in some of these close fights, he's not getting rocked, he's not getting taken down for minutes on end. They're just kind of close rounds at the end of it, and we're just trying to figure out who is the winner of a lot of those rounds. So hopefully Gane can tag him a la like Lyoto Machado way back in the day when Machado was able to hit him with a good straight. I just want to see John Jones face some type of adversity throughout this fight, but I do still have him. He's arguably the greatest fighter of all time. I'll be curious to see how he looks in the heavyweight division, but this should be a fun fight for him.
Should be a fun fight later on tonight. The Sidekick, you can check it out live. We haven't done one since UFC 281 here on the channel due to prior commitments and illness, really. I think that's been pretty much it. Matt, next weekend, of course, we have Petr Yan. He's taking on Merab Dvalishvili.
What a great fight night main event that is.
And it's actually, like, a good card.
Oh, yeah, like that's a really good one.
We don't have to play this card up. It plays itself.
Petr Yan and Merab both probably expected to be in a title shot their next time in the cage, and now they're fighting each other. So the fact that we get that as a free card main event is a great fight, too. And the thing I like about it is, it's not one of these fights that you're worried about how it's going to look after the third round. Like, can Merab and Petr Yan fight for 25 minutes at a pretty solid pace? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can. So I'm incredibly excited for that bantamweight fight.
Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully you can tune in to the rest of the content from Fight Night Picks. That Yan Merab video will be out in the very, very near future. The Sidekick later on tonight. Lots of great content with Fight Night Picks. We want to thank you so much for the likes and the super chats. You guys keep this channel going, so give yourselves a pat on the back. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.